Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself standing beside a quiet river. The current moves slowly, almost imperceptibly. Yet if you listen closely, you might hear an ancient rhythm within the trickle of water, a rhythm that seems older than time itself. Our ancestors used to say that human memory is not preserved only in books or inscriptions, but in the breath of the earth, in the flow of rivers, in the eternal pulse of the sea. And within all those memories, one story resounds louder than all others. The story of a great flood. From Mesopotamia, where the twin rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates once carved out fertile plains, comes the earliest echo, a story of Ziusudra, Atrahasis, and Utnapishtim. Across the seas, in Greece, poets spoke of Deucalion and Piri, who survived when Zeus sent waters to erase humankind. In India, there is Manu, warned by the divine fish Matsya, who built a vessel to carry sages and seeds. In China, the tale of Yu the Great tells not of fleeing the waters, but of mastering them. And far across the ocean, among the Aztec, the Maya, the Inca, and the Hopi, we find yet another echo, stories of humanity swallowed by rising waters, only to emerge again. Why? Why do peoples who never met, who lived continents apart, tell the same story? Why does the idea of a great flood appear everywhere, like a scar that humanity carries together? Scars are reminders. A scar on the body reminds us of pain endured. But the scar of humanity is something different. It is the memory of a disaster so immense that no culture could forget. That scar is the flood myth, passed down in firelit nights, carved into stone, whispered in rituals, preserved in songs. Not as a single version, but as scattered fragments, like shards of a broken vessel, waiting to be pieced back together. And when you hold those fragments side by side, you begin to notice patterns. In every culture, there is a warning, often from a god, a sage, or a mysterious being. In every story, there is a vessel, a boat, an ark, a red enclosure, a hollowed-out tree. There is always a small remnant, a family, or a chosen few who survive. There is always the preservation of seeds, animals, or knowledge. And always, there is the water rising without mercy, engulfing everything, until at last it recedes and the world begins again. Is this merely coincidence? Or is it the echo of something real, a shared trauma carried forward through myth? Tonight, as you lie still, let your mind drift backwards through time. Imagine thousands of years ago, families gathered around firelight, recounting how water once swallowed the earth. They had no alphabet, no scrolls, no written history. They had only memory. And so they told the story again and again, so that their children and their children's children would never forget. What we call myth may in truth be the oldest form of history, a memory carved not into stone tablets, but into the psyche of humankind. The Great Flood, then, is more than a religious tale. It is a doorway into humanity's deepest fear. The fear that nature can erase us in an instant. The fear of losing everything we know, home, family, even the very land beneath our feet. And yet, within this fear lies a glimmer of hope. Hope that someone, somehow, will survive. Hope that seeds will be preserved, that knowledge will endure, that life can begin again. You might recognize this feeling even in your own life. Storms can tear apart entire cities. Earthquakes can shatter the work of centuries. Yet humanity always rises again, building anew, telling stories of resilience. Flood myths are, in a sense, humanity as psychological map, a chart of how to navigate chaos and emerge on the other side. But here is the thought that unsettles and fascinates. What if the flood myths are not just symbols? What if they are not only metaphors, but also fragments of real history? What if a catastrophe of unimaginable scale truly did occur? One so severe that it left scars not only in geology, but in the collective memory of our species. This is the mystery we are about to enter. A journey not only of listening, but of remembering. Together, we will travel through Mesopotamia, Greece, India, China, and the Americas. We will sift through texts and tablets, temples and ruins. We will listen to geology, to climate science, to the faint voice of the earth itself. And somewhere within these echoes, in the black layers of sediment, in the erosion on the Sphinx, in the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, we may glimpse the outline of a forgotten truth. But before we begin, pause for a moment. Listen to your own breath, gently in and out. That rhythm you hear is the same rhythm that sustained countless humans who once endured the waters. They too breathed with fear. They too breathed with hope. And in some way, their breath has reached you across thousands of years. So let us ask our opening question, simple yet profound. Why do all peoples tell the same story of a great flood? Is it coincidence, or is it memory? Is it metaphor, or is it history? In the parts that follow, we will examine the fragments one by one. But for now, in this quiet night, all you need to remember is this. Wherever you look, in Mesopotamia, in Greece, in India, in China, in the Americas, humanity has left you the same message. A message written not in ink, but in water. A message carried not by scribes, but by survivors. A message of fear and of hope, of loss and of renewal. Let this story carry you gently towards sleep. As you drift, imagine that outside, rivers still flow, waves still break, carrying whispers from a forgotten past. This is not only a story of water, it is a story of us, of human beings, bound by a scar, bound by memory, bound by the will to endure. Imagine, once again, that you are seated beside the quiet river of time. The air is still. The only sound is the soft current carrying secrets downstream. If you lean in, you may begin to hear voices, voices not of our century, not even of our millennium, but from a world older than writing itself. They are the voices of Sumer, the first civilization to carve their memories into clay. And what did they choose to remember? Above kings, above dynasties, above victories and wars, the Sumerians preserved a single haunting tale, the story of the flood. The earliest version we know comes from the Eridu Genesis, a fragmentary tablet, broken and incomplete, yet holding within its cracks the echo of something vast. In this story, there is a man named Ziusudra. His name means life of long days, and indeed his life would stretch beyond any ordinary span. Ziusudra is warned, not by chance, not by luck, but by a divine whisper. The gods, displeased with humankind, have decided to send a flood to erase the world. Why? Here the ancient texts diverge from the familiar moral lessons of later times. In the Sumerian imagination, humanity was not guilty of sin or corruption. Instead, humanity was simply noisy. The clamor of human life rose up and disturbed the gods. And in their irritation, they chose destruction. A strange motive, almost casual, and yet it reveals a worldview very different from ours. Humans as fragile, expendable, at the mercy of divine whim. But in this grim decision, one figure is chosen to be spared. Ziusudra is instructed to build a vessel, not a small raft, not a fisherman's boat, but something large enough to carry his family, his animals, and the seed of life itself. He obeys. The storm comes. The waters rise. For 7 days and 7 nights the flood engulfs the earth. When at last the waves retreat, Ziusudra opens the doors of his vessel, and the world begins anew. As gratitude, he offers sacrifice to the gods. And the gods, perhaps softened, perhaps regretful, grant him immortality. Ziusudra becomes a bridge between the world before and the world after. Now, breathe slowly, and imagine this scene not as a story, but as memory. Imagine a people watching their land vanish beneath water, their villages swept away, their animals drowned. Imagine them clinging to any scrap of survival, and then telling their children, "There was one man who knew, one man who built a boat, and because of him, we live." From this early root, the story grows more detailed, more complex. In the Atrahasis epic, written centuries later in Akkadian, the flood narrative expands. Here we meet Atrahasis, whose name means exceedingly wise. Again, the gods are disturbed by humankind. Again, they decide on destruction. But one god, Enki, feels compassion. He warns Atrahasis in secret, speaking to him through a reed wall. He tells him to build a boat, to preserve life. Atrahasis listens, and when the flood arrives, he survives. Notice the refinement. Atrahasis is not only spared, he is chosen for his wisdom. The gods are no longer a single, unanimous force. They disagree, they argue. Enki defies the decision of the divine council, choosing to preserve humanity. Already, you can hear echoes of debates that later traditions will remember, a tension between wrath and mercy, between punishment and preservation. The Atrahasis account also lingers on details. The boat is described in measurements, in cubits and planks. Animals are loaded in pairs. There is a rhythm of precision, as if the scribes wanted the story to be not just a myth, but a blueprint. Instructions for survival should the waters ever return. And when the flood passes, Atrahasis too offers sacrifice. The gods, hungry after days without offerings, gather like flies around the smoke. The image is both comical and tragic. Divine beings, dependent on the devotion of mortals, needing humanity as much as humanity needs them. Now, let your breathing slow. Imagine lying beneath a canopy of stars, hearing this tale as it was recited thousands of years ago. The storyteller's voice low and steady, the children's eyes wide with fear and wonder. The flood was not an idea to them. It was not a bedtime fantasy. It was memory, perhaps the memory of a storm, or a river bursting its banks, or a rising sea. The details may have shifted, but the fear was real. The themes are striking. First, the flood as a reset button for humanity, a deliberate act of destruction to start the world anew. Second, the idea of a chosen survivor, singled out not by chance, but by knowledge, by wisdom, or by divine favor. And third, the preservation of life, animals, seeds, families, all carried across the waters, as if humanity itself were a fragile ark drifting on the sea of time. Think of how these motifs repeat across the globe. They are not the property of one culture. They are not inventions of one imagination. They are echoes, and in those echoes, perhaps, is the scar of a real event, something that seared itself so deeply into memory that it could not be forgotten. The story of Ziusudra and Atrahasis reminds us of something essential. Humans are storytellers, but we are also archivists of trauma. When disaster strikes, we do not only rebuild with stone and wood, we rebuild with words. We encode the pain into myth so that it will outlast us. And in doing so, we pass it forward, generation after generation. until it becomes almost indistinguishable from legend. So tonight, as you listen, consider this. Was Ziusudra a mythic hero? Or was he a man who really lived, who really survived a flood that swept across Sumer? Was Atrahasis a literary invention? Or was he a memory of some ancient survivor whose wisdom preserved his people? We may never know, yet the persistence of their names, their vessels, their sacrifices suggests that something real lies beneath. The flood myths of Mesopotamia are the oldest known, but they will not be the last. They are the roots from which later stories, Gilgamesh, Noah, Deucalion, Manu, will grow, each one reshaping the memory, reframing the cause, changing the gods, but always preserving the same core: destruction, survival, renewal. And so, in the quiet of this night, let us hold their memory gently. Ziusudra, Atrahasis. Names like whispers carried by the current of time. They speak of a world drowned, and of a fragile ark of hope that floated above the waves. Their story is our story. Their survival is the reason we are here. As you drift toward sleep, breathe slowly, as if you too were on that vessel, rocking gently on endless waters. Imagine the sound of rain subsiding, the silence after the storm, the first lights breaking through clouds. It is the moment when fear becomes hope, when chaos becomes calm. It is the moment the flood recedes and life begins again. Picture yourself now in a vast desert, the kind where the wind itself seems older than history. The sand moves in slow waves, and the stars above are sharp, unblinking eyes. Somewhere in this endless horizon, an old man waits, a man who carries the memory of the flood, a man whose name has crossed millennia, Utnapishtim. He is not just a character in a story. He is the immortal witness of a catastrophe that once erased the world. And it is in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving works of literature, that his voice is preserved. The tale begins with Gilgamesh himself, the restless king of Uruk, 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal. After losing his beloved companion Enkidu, he is consumed by the fear of death. He longs for eternal life, and so he journeys across deserts and mountains, through scorpion-guarded passes and across the waters of death, to find the one man who has achieved immortality, Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood. When Gilgamesh finally reaches him, Utnapishtim does not greet him with warmth or pity. He greets him with a story older than Gilgamesh, older than Uruk's mighty walls, older perhaps than writing itself. The gods, Utnapishtim says, had once decided to destroy humankind. Their reasons are blurred: too many people, too much noise, too much disturbance. The gods, like an Atrahasis, were restless and displeased. But the god Ea, known as Enki, in earlier Sumerian myths, whispered a warning. He told Utnapishtim to build a vessel, not a raft, not a hut, but a massive ark, sealed with pitch, wide and deep enough to hold his family, craftsmen, and every kind of animal. Listen carefully to how the epic describes it. The ark was square, its length equal to its width. It had 7 decks, each divided into compartments. Workers brought supplies: beer, oil, grain, wine. It was not merely a lifeboat. It was a floating city, a miniature world. And then the storm came. The gods themselves were terrified of the flood, the tablet reads. They fled upward to the highest heaven, cowering like dogs. The skies raged, the seas boiled. For 6 days and 7 nights, the winds and waves battered the earth until even the gods trembled at the destruction they had unleashed. On the 7th day, silence. The storm subsided. The ark floated upon a sea without shore. Now picture Utnapishtim, weary and hollow-eyed, opening the hatch of his ark. Around him, nothing but endless water. Days passed. To search for land, he released a dove. The bird circled and returned. Then he released a swallow. It, too, returned. Finally, he sent out a raven. The raven did not return. And in that moment, he knew. Somewhere, dry land waited. When the ark came to rest on a mountain, Utnapishtim built an altar. He offered sacrifice. The smoke rose into the heavens, and the gods, who had nearly annihilated their creation, gathered around like flies. They swore an oath never again to destroy humanity with such a flood, and they blessed Utnapishtim and his wife with immortality, setting them apart, forever removed from the ordinary fate of humankind. Breathe softly and consider what this story reveals. Here, for the first time, we have the flood woven into a grand epic, placed at the very heart of humanity's oldest literature. It is no longer just a myth whispered in fragments. It is a narrative, structured, preserved on clay tablets that have survived 4,000 years. The parallels are striking. Compare Utnapishtim with Ziusudra, with Atrahasis, with Noah. Each receives a warning. Each builds a vessel. Each preserves life. Each sends out birds to test the waters. Each offers sacrifice at the end. And yet, the reasons differ. In the Bible, humanity is punished for sin. In Mesopotamian myth, humanity is punished for noise, for disturbing the gods. The motivation changes, but the pattern of survival remains the same. Now imagine Gilgamesh hearing this story. He came seeking the secret of immortality. Instead, he receives a memory of how fragile life is, how easily the world can be swept away. Utnapishtim's immortality is not a gift of joy, but a curse of separation. He alone remembers a world drowned, a people erased. His eternal life is bound to eternal loss. And so, the epic transforms the flood into more than history. It becomes a meditation on mortality itself. To live forever is not to escape death, but to carry its shadow endlessly. Utnapishtim is not envied, he is pitied. His story teaches Gilgamesh and us that true immortality lies not in never dying, but in leaving behind walls, words, and memories that endure. As you rest now, let these echoes drift around you. The ark upon the waters, the raven flying free, the altar smoke rising into the silent sky. Imagine lying on the deck of that ancient vessel, the night still, stars mirrored in the flood below. Imagine the sound of waves lapping against wood, steady as a heartbeat. This is the rhythm of survival. This is the lullaby of continuity. The story of Utnapishtim is more than myth. It is testimony. Perhaps the details changed with each retelling, but the memory of a flood remained too deep to forget, too vivid to erase. And that memory has reached us, across 4,000 years, through broken tablets and fractured lines, through the restless quest of a king who could not accept death. The flood is the scar. Utnapishtim is the witness. And Gilgamesh, perhaps, like us, is the listener, searching for meaning in the ruins of the past. So, as you drift further into the stillness of night, remember this. Somewhere in the vast desert of time, an old man still tells his story. His ark still floats in the imagination. His raven still flies. And his voice, steady, solemn, enduring, is carried to you now, across the quiet expanse of the sleeping world. The river of stories now carries us to a place both familiar and sacred. It is the land of the Hebrews, where shepherds once looked up at the desert sky and found meaning in the stars, and where scribes would one day set down words that would shape half the world's faith. Among those words lies a tale that echoes the voices of Ziusudra, Atrahasis, and Utnapishtim, yet takes on a new depth, a new moral weight. It is the story of Noah and the 40 days of rain. Close your eyes and picture the world as the book of Genesis describes it. Humanity has multiplied across the earth. Villages have grown, fields stretch far, but with growth has come something darker. The text says the earth was filled with violence. People's thoughts were only evil continually. It is no longer the gods disturbed by human noise, as in Mesopotamia. Here it is, one god disturbed by human corruption. The story shifts from cosmic irritation to divine justice. The flood is not simply a reset, it is a cleansing. And so God looks upon the earth and sees only one man worth sparing. His name is Noah, and he is described as righteous in his generation. God tells him, "Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, with rooms inside it, and cover it with pitch inside and out." Dimensions are given: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. A vessel of monumental scale, a floating fortress of life. Noah obeys. He gathers his family, his wife, his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. He brings the animals, 2 by 2, every kind of bird, beast, and creeping thing. And when the ark is sealed, the skies open. Here the story changes tone. Not a sudden cosmic storm as in Gilgamesh, but a steady, relentless downpour. Rain falling for 40 days and 40 nights, until the highest mountains are covered. Imagine that sound, not thunder, not waves, but the endless drumming of rain, day after day, night after night, until the whole world is water. Inside the ark, the air must have been thick with the smell of wood, pitch, and animals. The darkness broken only by flickering lamps. The groan of the vessel as it rose higher, lifted by waters that had no shore. Perhaps Noah sat awake through the nights, listening to the cries of creatures, the sobs of his family, and the ceaseless pounding of rain on the roof. Then, silence. After 40 days, the rain stopped, but the waters lingered. For months, the ark drifted, waiting, rocking gently upon an endless sea. Noah, like Utnapishtim, released birds, a raven first, then a dove. The raven never returned. The dove came back with nothing. Then again, a week later, with a freshly plucked olive leaf. And in that single green leaf lay the promise that the earth was alive again. At last the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. The doors opened, and Noah stepped out into a world washed clean. The silence of devastation gave way to the sounds of new life. The bleating of animals, the cry of birds, the whisper of wind over fresh ground. Noah built an altar and offered sacrifice. The smoke rose to heaven, and God, seeing it, made a covenant. Never again would a flood destroy all life. As a sign, he set a rainbow in the sky, a bridge of color, fragile yet eternal, spanning storm and sunlight. Now let your breathing slow. Feel the rhythm of 40 days, each breath a drop of rain, steady and unending. Imagine yourself on that ark, listening to the water surround you, feeling both fear and fragile hope. The flood becomes not only a story of destruction, but of endurance. The ark is not just a vessel of wood. It is a metaphor for the fragile container of human survival. Notice how the story evolves across cultures. In Sumer and Akkad, the gods destroy humanity for noise, for numbers. In Gilgamesh, the reason is blurred, perhaps jealousy, perhaps restlessness. But here, in Genesis, the flood becomes a moral narrative. It is about righteousness and corruption, justice and mercy. Noah is not spared randomly. He is spared because he is upright. The story becomes not only memory, but theology, a lesson about the nature of God and the fate of humankind. And yet, beneath the moral frame, the same motifs remain: a warning, a chosen man, a vessel sealed with pitch, animals preserved, birds sent forth to test the waters, a sacrifice at the end, and, above it all, the endless, engulfing flood. This continuity suggests something deeper, that the Hebrews inherited and reshaped an older memory, giving it new meaning for their people. The Babylonian exile, centuries later, may have been the bridge through which Mesopotamian stories flowed into Hebrew tradition. And so, Noah becomes both a man of faith and a symbol of continuity. The link between primeval memory and revealed scripture. Imagine how this story must have sounded to the ancient listener. Not just a tale of survival, but a reassurance that chaos is not the final word, that even in judgment there is mercy, that after the storm there will be a rainbow. In this way, the Noah story becomes not only a memory of catastrophe, but also a promise of hope. As you drift in the quiet tonight, picture the ark resting on high ground, the doors opening to fresh air. Picture the rainbow stretching across a sky that has wept itself empty. Hear the soft call of the dove, the rustle of leaves, the trickle of water retreating into rivers and seas. Let that image be your lullaby, the promise that no matter how fierce the storm, renewal will come. The story of Noah, like those before it, is a scar of water on humanity's collective memory. But it is also a beacon, shining across centuries. A reminder that even in the face of destruction, life finds a way forward. And in that promise, we, too, can rest. Now the river of stories carries us westward, across the Mediterranean, to the land of marble cliffs and olive groves, of poets and philosophers, of gods who walked among mortals. Here, beneath the blue skies of ancient Greece, the flood memory takes another form. It is the tale of Deucalion and Piri, a story not only of destruction, but of rebirth. Close your eyes and imagine the Greek world of long ago. The gods of Olympus looked down from their high mountain. They watched the deeds of men, and what they saw filled them with anger. Humanity had grown proud, insolent, forgetting reverence, indulging in violence and deceit. It was not noise that disturbed the heavens, as in Mesopotamia, nor vague corruption, as in Genesis. Here it was hubris, arrogance before the divine. Zeus, the thunderer, decided the world must be cleansed. And so he gathered the clouds, loosed the storms, and sent rain upon the earth. The rivers overflowed their banks. The sea surged inland. Villages vanished. Temples crumbled. Mountains themselves seemed to shudder beneath the flood. In this chaos, two figures were spared. Deucalion, son of Prometheus, the Titan who once gave fire to mankind, and his wife, Piri, daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora. Their lineage was unique, half mortal, half divine, chosen not because they were flawless, but because they were humble and just. Prometheus, wise and foreseeing, had warned his son of the coming disaster. Deucalion built a chest, a vessel strong enough to endure the waters. And when the rains came, he and Piri climbed inside. For 9 days and 9 nights, the chest drifted over a drowned world. Imagine being within it, the creak of timbers, the press of darkness, the endless sway of water beneath. Outside, thunder roared, lightning tore the sky into jagged shards. But inside, two souls held onto each other, carrying not only their lives, but the fragile spark of humankind. At last, the waters receded. The chest came to rest on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. When Deucalion and Piri stepped out, the earth was silent. No voices, no flocks, no smoke rising from hearths. They were utterly alone, the last two mortals beneath the sky. Here the Greek imagination turns from destruction to rebirth. For Deucalion and Piri, grief mingled with awe. How could they repopulate the earth? They prayed to Themis, goddess of divine order, asking how humankind might be restored. The oracle's answer was puzzling. Cover your heads, unbind your garments, and throw behind you the bones of your mother. At first, they recoiled. To throw the bones of one's mother seemed an act of sacrilege. But then they understood. Mother was the earth itself, and her bones were the stones scattered upon the ground. So they obeyed. They covered their heads, loosened their robes, and cast stones behind them. And as the stones touched the earth, they transformed. Those cast by Deucalion became men. Those cast by Piri became women. Slowly, the earth repopulated itself, reborn from stone. Humanity began again. Now let your breathing deepen and consider the symbolism of this myth. Where Mesopotamian stories emphasized survival, where the Hebrew tales stressed morality, the Greek version highlights renewal. From the lifeless, from the cold hardness of stone, new life emerges. It is a meditation on resilience. Even when the world is stripped bare, humanity can be born again. The imagery is powerful. Imagine a barren plain, water still dripping from the rocks, clouds clearing overhead. Two figures bend, lift stones, cast them behind, and in the quiet, each stone stirs, shifts, and rises as a human form. Arms, legs, eyes, voices. A new people, born not of flesh, but of earth itself. The myth tells us that even after annihilation, creation is possible. Even when hope seems gone, life has a way of returning, and there is something else. Deucalion is the son of Prometheus, the titan punished for giving fire to mankind. Piri is the granddaughter of Pandora, who opened the jar and unleashed sorrow into the world. Their lineage holds both the gift of knowledge and the burden of suffering. They carry within them the paradox of humanity, creativity and hubris, resilience and fragility. By choosing them as the survivors, the Greeks preserved the idea that humanity itself is a blend of gift and flaw, and that this mixture continues even after a world-ending flood. Think of how this myth would have been told around the hearths of ancient Greece. Perhaps sailors listened to it before venturing into dangerous seas. Perhaps farmers recited it during long winters, reminding themselves that spring would return. Perhaps poets wove it into epics to explain why humans exist at all. In each telling, the flood was both an ending and a beginning, both a warning and a promise. As you rest tonight, imagine the ark-like chest drifting on endless waters, then settling at last upon a mountain peak. Picture Deucalion and Piri standing in the silence of a world reborn, stones at their feet, sky clearing above. Imagine each stone tossed behind them, rising as a new figure, the earth repopulating itself in slow, miraculous rhythm. Let that image soothe you, the certainty that life returns, even from lifelessness. In the Greek imagination, the flood is not only destruction, it is transformation. And through it, humanity learns that survival is not enough. We must also learn to begin again. So breathe gently, and let the story of Deucalion and Piri drift around you like soft waves. In their humility, in their quiet faith, they carried forward the human story. And in their stones, in their rebirth, They remind us that from even the hardest fragments, life can rise anew. The waters of myth carry us further still, deeper into the imagination of the Greeks. After the tale of Deucalion and Piri, there is another story, not of two survivors repopulating the earth, but of an entire civilization swallowed by the sea. It is a story told not in whispers around village fires, but in the words of a philosopher, woven into dialogues about justice, power, and the nature of the world. This is the tale of Atlantis, the island that rose in glory, and then, in a single day and night, was lost beneath the ocean. Close your eyes and picture the scene as Plato described it in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, across the sea from Athens. He says, lay a great island, larger than Libya and Asia combined. Its kings were mighty, its armies vast, its harbors crowded with ships. The Atlanteans were descendants of Poseidon, god of the sea, and their land was blessed with fertile fields, flowing rivers, and rich metals. Their capital was a wonder, concentric rings of land and water, bridges connecting circles like ripples frozen in stone, temples gleaming with orichalcum, a metal lost to us now. Atlantis, in Plato's telling, was a civilization of extraordinary power, and yet power was its undoing. For though they began noble, the Atlanteans grew greedy. Their ambition outpaced their wisdom. They set their sights on conquest, seeking to rule the Mediterranean world, and it was Athens, humble yet virtuous, that stood against them. Here is where the story shifts from wonder to tragedy. For the gods, angered at the Atlanteans' pride, sent judgment. In a single night of storms and earthquakes, the great island was swallowed by the sea. The harbors, the temples, the palaces, all vanished beneath the waves. Atlantis was no more, leaving behind only memory, a parable carved into Plato's philosophy. Now, let your breathing slow and consider how this story fits into the larger current of flood myths. Unlike Deucalion, unlike Noah, unlike Utnapishtim, here the focus is not on one man or one family, but on an entire civilization lost. Atlantis is not about survival. It is about disappearance. The sea does not leave a remnant. It erases completely. The myth becomes less a comfort and more a warning. Even the greatest powers can fall, and the sea will take what it is owed. But perhaps Atlantis is more than parable. Some have wondered, did Plato invent the tale purely as allegory, or was he passing down fragments of memory? Plato himself claimed that the story came from Solon, the Athenian statesman, who had learned it from Egyptian priests. If true, then the myth is not only Greek, but older still, an echo carried across cultures, reshaped into a philosopher's dialogue. Imagine, if you will, the eruption of Thera, the island we call Santorini today. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano erupted with a force among the greatest in human history. The explosion tore apart the island, sent tsunamis sweeping across the Aegean, and cast ash into the sky for miles. The flourishing Minoan civilization, masters of the sea, began to collapse in its wake. Some see in this catastrophe the seed of Plato's Atlantis, a great maritime people undone by the sea itself. Whether allegory or memory, Atlantis captures a truth that resonates with all the flood stories we have heard: the fragility of civilization. The Atlanteans, like us, built cities, raised temples, mastered trade, expanded their influence. But no matter their might, they were vulnerable. One night of storms, one shudder of the earth, and their world was gone. Now, picture the lost island in your mind's eye. Concentric canals, glowing temples, bustling harbors, all sinking slowly, swallowed by dark waves. Imagine the silence after, the sea calm again, as if nothing had ever been there. Somewhere beneath the waters, the stones still stand, unseen, unreachable. And in our imagination, Atlantis lives on, not as ruins, but as memory, a dream of what was and what might be lost again. There is a rhythm in these myths, a pattern like the tide, creation, corruption, destruction, renewal. Mesopotamia gave us Ziusudra and Atrahasis, survivors of divine wrath. Gilgamesh brought us Utnapishtim, immortal witness to the flood. Genesis gave us Noah, righteous man preserved through 40 days of rain. Greece gave us Deucalion and Piri, who cast stones to repopulate the earth. And now, through Plato, Greece gives us Atlantis, not a survivor's tale, but a civilization's epitaph. Each story reflects not only fear of water, but awe before it. Water is life. It nourishes fields, carries ships, sustains the body. Yet water is also death. It rises, it drowns, it erases. To live beside rivers and seas is to live with this paradox. And so humans turned it into myth, to remind themselves of the power they could never tame. As you lie in the quiet now, let yourself drift upon the waters of imagination. Picture the island of Atlantis beneath the sea, its marble halls filled with silence, its temples standing like shadows in the deep. Hear the gentle sound of waves above, calm now, as if guarding a secret. Let the image soothe you, the reminder that even when great cities fall, memory carries them forward. Atlantis may never have existed, or perhaps it did, in some form, long forgotten. But the truth is less about geography than about memory. Atlantis is every city that thought itself eternal, every empire that believed itself unshakable, every people who forgot the sea's hunger. Its story is a mirror, reflecting both the splendor and the fragility of civilization. So breathe gently, and let Plato's words drift through you like the tide. The flood is not always the end of a family or a tribe. Sometimes it is the end of a world entire. And in that ending lies a lesson that nothing made by human hands is beyond the reach of the sea. As you sink deeper into rest, imagine the final image, a rainbow arc above Noah's world, stones rising behind Deucalion and Piri, and far out at sea, an island slipping beneath the waves. 3 stories, 3 voices, 1 scar of water, and through them all the same quiet whisper: life is fragile and memory is precious. The waters of story now flow eastward, across mountains and plains, to the vast land of India, a land where myths breathe like the monsoon winds, heavy with symbols, rich with cycles. Here, the flood takes a new shape, not as mere punishment, nor as erasure, but as part of the eternal rhythm of creation and destruction. It is the story of Manu and Matsya, of wisdom preserved through water, of an ark that carried not only life, but knowledge itself. Close your eyes and picture the ancient world of the Vedas. The hymns are sung, their syllables echoing across centuries. In those verses, and in later Puranic traditions, comes the tale of Manu, the first man, the lawgiver, the ancestor of all humanity. And with him comes Matsya, the great fish, who is more than a fish, a divine being, an avatar of Vishnu, preserver of the cosmos. The story begins gently, almost humbly. Manu, we are told, was washing his hands in a river when he found a tiny fish struggling in his palms. The fish begged him, "Protect me, and I will one day save you." Manu, compassionate, placed the fish in a jar. But the fish grew, and Manu moved it to a pond. Still, it grew, and he moved it to a lake. Yet it kept growing, larger and larger, until finally he released it into the sea. There, revealed in majesty, the fish spoke, "I am Matsya, the divine. A great flood is coming. Build a boat, and when the waters rise, I will guide you." So Manu built his vessel. Not unlike Noah's Ark or Utnapishtim's ship, it was designed to carry him and the seeds of all living things. And when the flood came, rains pouring, rivers swelling, oceans rising, Manu entered the boat, carrying with him the 7 sages, the rishis, and seeds of every plant. Matsya appeared again, vast and radiant, a horn upon his head. Manu tied the boat to that horn with a serpent as rope, and Matsya drew the vessel safely through the cosmic waters. Imagine the scene: darkness above, endless waters below. The boat rocking gently, but never lost, guided by a luminous fish cutting through the flood like a beacon. Inside, Manu and the sages sat, guarding their seeds, guarding their chants, guarding the memory of the world that had been when at last the waters receded. The boat came to rest upon a mountain. From there, Manu and the sages descended, and life began anew. From the seeds they carried, plants grew. From the wisdom they preserved, civilization was born again. Manu, the survivor, became not only the father of humanity, but the giver of laws, the one who established Dharma, the sacred order that sustains life. Now let your breathing fall into rhythm, steady as the rocking of the ark. Feel the calm assurance in this story that even when waters rise, there is guidance, there is order, there is preservation. Unlike the wrathful gods of Mesopotamia, unlike the jealous Olympians, the divine here is protective, nurturing. Vishnu, through Matsya, is not destroying humanity but safeguarding its future. The flood becomes not punishment, but passage. Notice, too, the unique details. In Mesopotamia, the survivor preserves animals and people. In Genesis, Noah carries creatures and family. But in India, Manu carries knowledge, the Vedas, the chants, the sacred fire, the seeds of plants. It is not just life that must be saved, but memory, wisdom, continuity. The Ark of India is as much a library as it is a lifeboat. The symbolism deepens when we see the flood not as a one-time event, but as part of the cosmic cycle. In Hindu thought, time is vast, stretching across ujas and kalpas, ages of creation, destruction, and rebirth. Floods are not anomalies. They are woven into the very rhythm of existence. The world ends, the world begins again. The flood of Manu and Matsya is one among many, not the final catastrophe, but a reminder that endings are always beginnings. Now, imagine the comfort this story would have brought to its listeners. Farmers watching the rivers swell in monsoon rains might hear in it not terror, but reassurance, that floods, however destructive, are part of the great order. Scholars chanting hymns in temples might see in it not fear, but the promise that wisdom endures, carried forward even through chaos. Children listening at night might picture the shining fish, gentle yet powerful, towing the boat of life through the waters, a divine guardian, a protector in the storm. As you rest, let that image carry you. A great ark tied with a serpent's rope, pulled by a luminous fish across a boundless sea. Inside the ark, the sages murmur hymns, keeping alive the sound of the cosmos. Seeds lie safe in jars, waiting for the soil to dry. Manu closes his eyes, trusting the guidance of Matsya, trusting that the flood is not the end. The story of Manu and Matsya adds another thread to the tapestry of flood myths. It reminds us that survival is not only physical but spiritual, that what we save in times of crisis is not only bodies, but ideas, memories, stories. It teaches that the flood is not simply a disaster, but also a cleansing, a renewal, a passage into another cycle of being. So breathe gently now. Let the waters of the flood rock you as Matsya rocked Manu's boat. Imagine the mountain rising at last from the receding sea, green shoots breaking from the soil. The dawn of a new age spreading light across the horizon. Let the certainty of renewal calm you. Even after the flood, life flows on. The river of myths now bends toward the east, across mountains shrouded in mist, across rivers that coil like dragons through the valleys of China. Here, the memory of the flood takes on a different character. It is not only a story of survival, nor of wrath, nor of divine rescue. It is a story of human ingenuity, of patience, of toil. It is the tale of you, the great, the man who did not flee the waters, but who tamed them. Close your eyes and imagine the vast yellow river, China's sorrow swelling beyond its banks. For centuries, it has flooded plains, drowned fields, swallowed villages. Imagine the terror of ancient people watching waters rise again and again, sweeping away harvests, leaving behind only mud and hunger. Out of this terror comes the legend of a man who refused to surrender. The story begins with chaos. In the earliest times, the rivers overflowed ceaselessly, mountains collapsed, valleys filled, the world itself seemed to drown. The people despaired. The emperor appointed Gun, Yu's father, to stop the flood. Gun tried to build great dams, walls of earth, to block the waters. But the waters rose higher, overtopped the walls, and the dams collapsed. Gun failed, and for 9 years the floods raged on. After Gun's death, the task fell to his son, Yu. But Yu chose a different path. Instead of blocking the waters, he sought to guide them. Instead of building walls, he carved channels. With his hands and with the help of thousands, Yu labored to cut canals, dredge riverbeds, and open pathways for the waters to flow safely to the sea. Picture him now, a man moving tirelessly across the land, tracing the course of rivers, studying the lay of mountains, measuring the flow of streams. It is said that Yu worked for 13 years without rest. He passed his own home 3 times and never entered, for fear of delaying his mission. His body bore the marks of labor, his hands calloused from digging, his legs scarred from wading through floods. Yet he did not stop. The legends tell us that even the animals and spirits aided him. A black turtle carried earth for his embankments. A yellow dragon helped carve channels through stone. Whether myth or symbol, these images remind us that our struggle was not only human but cosmic. A harmony between man and nature, between effort and destiny. At last, the waters were tamed. The floods receded, fields dried, villages flourished once more. You had given the people not only safety, but the gift of agriculture, the ability to settle, to plant, to build. Out of his labor, a new order was born. Grateful, the people made him their leader, and he became the founder of the Shire dynasty, the first legendary dynasty of China. Now let your breathing slow and reflect on how this story differs from the others. In Mesopotamia, humans are at the mercy of gods who drown them for noise. In Genesis, humanity is judged and saved only by divine choice. In India, a god in the form of a fish pulls the ark across the flood. But in China, the flood is not escaped or survived, it is mastered. The hero is not a chosen survivor, but a worker, a problem solver, a man of patience and endurance. The myth becomes a lesson in perseverance, in harmony with nature, in the belief that even chaos can be shaped by human hands. Consider also the moral weight of use, sacrifice. He gave his life to the flood, never resting, never turning aside. In some versions, his body was deformed by the labor, his gait uneven from wading through mud and water. He became, quite literally, marked by the struggle. And yet, his scars were the scars of a savior, the price of order carved from chaos. There is more. In 2016, scientists studying the Jishi Gorge in China discovered evidence of a massive landslide and flood that occurred around 1920 BCE. The Yellow River was dammed by rock, and when the dam broke, water cascaded downstream with unimaginable force, flooding the plains. The scale of the disaster fits eerily with the legend of Yu, suggesting that behind the myth, there may lie a memory of a real, catastrophic flood. Now, picture you standing upon a high embankment, looking down at the waters, finally flowing in their channels. Picture the people around him, planting seeds again, building homes again, their laughter rising like sunlight after rain. Picture the dragon, the turtle, the spirits retreating into legend, their work done. The world has been remade, not by destruction, but by discipline. This, too, is part of the great scar of water. Humanity does not always remember floods as annihilation. Sometimes we remember them as challenges, moments where survival depended not only on divine favor, but on human courage. Yu's story tells us that even against forces as vast as rivers, human effort can prevail. As you drift towards sleep, let Yu's story become a gentle rhythm in your mind. The steady flow of water through channels, the patient hand guiding the stream, the quiet strength of one who labors not for himself, but for generations to come. In this way, Yu the Great becomes more than a figure of legend. He is an archetype, the one who does not flee chaos, but who shapes it into order. His story is not only about taming water, but about taming fear, taming despair, taming the belief that nothing can be done. And in this, his legacy is as enduring as any arc. So breathe deeply now, and imagine the rivers flowing gently, no longer raging, but gliding peacefully toward the sea. Imagine fields blooming where floods once raged. Imagine families gathering harvests where despair once lingered. And know that even in the darkest floods of life, there is a path forward, carved patiently, steadily, by hands that refuse to give up. The river of memory now stretches far across the world, over mountains and oceans, until it touches the lands of the Americas. Lands where towering peaks brush, the sky where vast rivers, snake-like veins of silver, where ancient peoples carved their stories into stone and carried them in songs. And here too, as in Mesopotamia, as in Greece, as in India, as in China, we find the same haunting memory. The world swallowed by a flood. Close your eyes and imagine the high Andes, where the air is thin and the clouds drift close to the earth. Here the Inca told of Viracocha, the great creator god, who once grew angry with humankind. In some versions, the people had become arrogant, forgetting the order of creation. In others, they had turned to violence and sin. And so, Viracocha sent a flood to wash them away. The world was drowned, but from the waters, new humanity arose, reshaped, renewed, given another chance. Travel northward, and the echoes continue. Among the Maya, in the sacred text known as the Popol Vuh, the gods attempted several creations of mankind. First, they formed humans of mud, but the mud crumbled. Then they formed humans of wood, and though the wooden people multiplied, they had no soul, no heart. They did not honor their makers, and so the gods destroyed them. Some were consumed by jaguars, others turned into monkeys, and still others were swept away by a great flood of resin that poured down like burning rain. Only later would humans be made of maize, the sacred corn, the true flesh of mankind. Further still, the Aztecs of central Mexico told of an age called Nahui Atal, for water. They believed the world passed through cycles of creation and destruction, each ending in catastrophe. In that age of water, the earth was overwhelmed by flood, and all humanity was turned into fish. The cycle ended, but a new sun arose, and a new age began. To the Aztecs, the flood was not merely a past event, but part of an eternal rhythm, a reminder that the cosmos itself lives and dies in cycles. Now let your breathing deepen and imagine the deserts and mesas of the American Southwest, where the Hopi people tell their stories. In their tradition, humanity once lived in earlier worlds, but corruption and disharmony led to destruction. In one version, the earth was cleansed by flood, and only a small group survived by taking refuge inside a hollow reed. Guided by the spirits, they floated safely until the waters receded, and then emerged to begin life anew in this present world. Notice how familiar these images sound. A chosen remnant, a vessel, whether an ark, a chest, or a hollow reed. Animals preserved, seeds protected, guidance from divine beings. These themes, so consistent across continents, whisper of a scar deeper than mere coincidence. Consider, too, the details that make the American stories unique. The Inca emphasized the figure of Viracocha, a civilizing god who not only destroyed but also recreated, teaching survivors agriculture, laws, and arts. The Maya spoke of the flawed creations before humanity, mud, wood, and of a flood, not of water, but of burning resin, as if their memory fused disaster with fire as well as water. The Aztec placed the flood within a cosmic calendar, seeing it not as one event, but as one cycle among many. The Hopi preserved the image of survival inside the hollow reed, fragile yet strong enough to carry the seed of life. Modern archaeology, too, adds its whispers. In North America, scientists have found a mysterious layer of dark sediment called the Black Mat, dated to around 12,800 years ago. Beneath it lie the bones of mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, creatures of the Ice Age. Above it, they are gone. Some researchers believe this black mat records the aftermath of a sudden catastrophe, wildfires, flooding, climate upheaval. The same time period, the same scars appear in Greenland's ice cores, where a sudden spike of platinum, rare on Earth but abundant in comets, suggests a cosmic impact. Could it be that the flood stories of the Americas are echoes of this very event? Now, picture the landscapes of the Americas after such a cataclysm. Ice sheets melting, rivers surging, plains drowned, forests set aflame, smoke rising into a darkened sky. To those who lived through it, it must have felt like the end of the world. And when survivors told their children, they shaped the chaos into story. A god angered, a flood unleashed, a chosen few preserved. There is something deeply human in these tales. The Inca, the Maya, the Aztec, the Hopi, they did not simply describe disaster, they embedded it in meaning. The flood was not random. It was response, it was judgment, it was renewal. And from the survivors came the gifts of agriculture, of law, of sacred knowledge. Just as Manu in India preserved seeds, just as Noah preserved animals, so too did the peoples of the Americas carry forward the essentials of life into the new age. As you rest tonight, let your mind wander across these vast lands. Hear the whisper of wind through Andean peaks, the rustle of maize fields in the Maya lowlands, the distant roar of waterfalls in the forests of Mexico, the hush of desert mesas under starlight. Imagine the people who once listened to these flood stories, sitting by firelight, gazing at the same stars you see now, passing down the memory of waters that once tried to erase them. The flood myths of the Americas add yet another thread to the great tapestry. They tell us that the scar of water is not limited by oceans. It is not confined to Mesopotamia, or Greece, or India, or China. It is global, it is human. It is a memory so deep, so haunting, that it rose again wherever people remembered, wherever people feared, wherever people hoped. So breathe slowly, and let the stories carry you as gently as the reed boat carried the Hopi, as surely as Marcia guided Manu, as steadfastly as the ark bore Noah. Imagine the flood waters receding once more, mountains rising from the sea, the air filled with birdsong, fields sprouting anew. From destruction, life returns. From memory, meaning is born. And in that quiet, let yourself drift deeper into sleep, knowing that the same rhythm of loss and renewal of flood and rebirth has guided humanity for thousands of years, and that you too are part of that ancient current. Up until now, we have wandered through myth, the voices of Sumer and Akkad, of Greece and India, of China and the Americas. Each told us of waters rising, of humanity almost erased, of survival by a fragile thread. But what if these were not only stories? What if beneath the myth there is history, a catastrophe written not only in legend but in the very stones of the earth? To find it, we must travel back not thousands, but 12,800 years, to the twilight of the Ice Age. The world then was colder, glaciers stretching across continents, sea levels lower, vast plains where oceans now roll. And then something happened. Something so sudden, so violent, that it left scars still visible in the geological record. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Close your eyes and imagine it. A great comet, perhaps miles wide, breaking apart as it hurtled through the inner solar system. Its fragments fell like fire upon the earth. Some struck the vast Laurentide ice sheet, 2 miles thick, that covered North America. In an instant, ice turned to vapor, water turned to flood, land turned to ash. The sky filled with dust, the sun dimmed. The world shivered into chaos. Breathe slowly and listen to the evidence the earth itself offers. Across North America and beyond, geologists have found a strange, dark layer in the soil, the black mat. Beneath it, mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and the stone tools of the Clovis people, the first widespread culture of the continent. Above it, nothing. A sudden extinction, as if a curtain fell in one geological moment. Inside this black mat, scientists discovered microscopic diamonds, formed only under unimaginable pressure. They found melted glass, droplets of earth turned liquid and hurled into the sky, then rained back down. They found tiny magnetic spheres, evidence of rock vaporized in a cosmic blast. They found unusual levels of iridium, a metal rare on Earth but abundant in asteroids and comets. And most telling of all, they found a spike of platinum in the ice of Greenland, a signature marker of extraterrestrial impact. This is the scar of the Younger Dryas. Now picture the consequences. The ice sheet cracked, melted, and collapsed. Torrents of fresh water poured across the land, scouring valleys to bedrock, leaving behind the strange, channeled landscapes we still see in the American Northwest. The oceans, fed by this sudden melt, surged upward. Every coastline was drowned. The plains where humans had built their homes, hunted their game, told their stories, all swallowed by rising seas. And above it all, fire. The heat of impact ignited forests, burning continents, filling the sky with smoke. The dust and ash dimmed the sun, plunging the earth into sudden winter. Crops withered, herds vanished. Human communities, scattered and fragile, faced hunger, fear, and loss. Imagine being there. Imagine standing beneath a darkened sky, watching fire fall, watching water surge, watching the animals vanish, the land itself transformed. To live through such a moment would be to watch the world end, and to tell of it afterward would be to tell of a great flood, a darkness, a noise, a cleansing of the earth. Does this sound familiar? It should, for it matches, almost perfectly, the motifs of the myths. Fire from the sky, darkness for years, cold winters, floods that drowned the world, and the vanishing of giants, both animal and, in some traditions, human. The comet, it seems, may have given us not only destruction but memory, preserved in story after story across cultures. Now let your breathing soften, and consider how the myths and the science converge. The Mesopotamian flood spoke of gods unleashing waters. The Greek flood spoke of Zeus's judgment. The Indian flood spoke of a divine fish guiding survivors. The American myths spoke of gods burning the world with resin and drowning it in water. And the earth itself speaks of a comet, of impact, of fire, of flood. Different languages, different images, one event. The Younger Dryas catastrophe was, for its survivors, nothing less than a global reset. Life did not vanish completely, but it was transformed. Entire species disappeared. Human cultures collapsed. And yet, in the ashes of destruction, some endured. They told their children what had happened. They carved it into myth so it would not be forgotten. And so, thousands of years later, we still carry their warning, that fire can fall from the sky, that water can erase the land, that the world can change in an instant. Picture the black mat again, that thin, dark line in the earth, stretching across continents. It is like a tombstone, a geological scar marking the death of an age. And just above it lies our age, the one we still inhabit. We walk upon the graves of mammoths. We till fields laid bare by floods. We sail oceans that once were plains. Without even knowing, we live in the aftermath of catastrophe. As you drift into the quiet tonight, imagine the night sky of 12,000 years ago. A streak of light appears, then another, then many fragments of a comet descending. Imagine the earth trembling, the roar of impact, the flash of fire, the rush of waves. Imagine the silence after, broken only by the sound of water retreating, of wind carrying ash, of survivors whispering in fear. Those whispers became the stories we still tell, of floods, of gods, of endings and beginnings. The Younger Dryas impact reminds us that myth is not only imagination. Sometimes it is memory, distorted, reframed, but real. The flood myths of the world may be the human way of saying, we lived through fire and water once, and we survived. So breathe gently now. Let the rhythm of your breath be like the rhythm of the waves that rose and fell 12,000 years ago. Let the memory of the comet pass across your mind like a fading streak of light in the night sky. And as you rest, remember, the scar of water, the scar of fire, the scar of loss, are all part of the same story. The story of how humanity endured. The river of memory now drifts to Egypt, where the desert stretches like an ocean of sand and the Nile flows steady and timeless. On the Giza Plateau, among pyramids that pierce the horizon, there lies a figure older still, half lion, half human, carved from living bedrock. It gazes eastward toward the rising sun. It is the great Sphinx, the silent sentinel of forgotten ages. Close your eyes and imagine its face, worn by centuries of wind and sand, its nose long gone, its body half buried and unearthed again. For travelers and scholars alike, the Sphinx has always been an enigma. Who built it? When? And why does it stand there, gazing eternally across the desert? For generations, Egyptologists dated the Sphinx to the reign of Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC. They placed it neatly within the timeline of the Old Kingdom, a guardian for pyramids, a symbol of divine kingship. But in the 1990s, a new voice challenged this certainty. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University, looked not at the art of the Sphinx, nor the inscriptions, but at the stone itself. What he saw was startling. The body of the Sphinx and the walls of its enclosure are not etched with the horizontal striations typical of wind and sand erosion. Instead, they are carved with deep vertical fissures, rounded grooves, smoothed surfaces. Schoch recognized them instantly, the unmistakable marks of water erosion. Breathe slowly and let that sink in. Water, rain, not sand, not wind. The Sahara, for the last 5,000 years, has been as dry as it is today. For the Sphinx to show such patterns, it must have stood through thousands of years of heavy, sustained rainfall rains that ended long before dynastic Egypt began. This would mean the Sphinx is far older than we thought. Not 4,500 years old, but perhaps 7,000, 9,000, even 12,000 years. A monument not of pharaohs, but of a forgotten people, built in a time when the climate of Egypt was lush and wet, when the desert had not yet claimed the land. If true, the implications ripple outward like waves. The Sphinx would be among the oldest stone monuments on Earth, older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, possibly as old as the end of the last ice age, the same time as the Younger Dryas cataclysm, the same time as the Great Flood, remembered in myths across the globe. Now, imagine the Sphinx as it might have been then, not half buried in sand, but standing tall in a green landscape, rains falling upon its carved body, grass and rivers nearby. Imagine a people we no longer know, carving this colossal figure with skill and vision, then vanishing from memory, leaving only this stone guardian behind. The Sphinx becomes more than a monument. It becomes a witness to reigns long forgotten, to an age erased. Its eroded body is a geological memory, like the black mat of North America or the ice cores of Greenland, a silent testimony to a climate and a time beyond our recorded history. Think also of its form, a lion's body, symbol of strength, with a human head, symbol of wisdom. Was this deliberate? Was it meant as a message across millennia, that power must be guided by mind, that knowledge must stand guard over strength? Or was it something deeper, something we cannot yet decode, the emblem of a culture lost, a cipher of forgotten gods? Now let your breathing fall into rhythm with the desert wind. Imagine standing before the Sphinx at dawn, the sky streaked with pink, the air cool before the sun's ascent. The silence is immense, broken only by the cry of a distant bird. The statue gazes east, as it has for thousands upon thousands of years, watching the sun rise again and again over cycles of human history. Kings rose and fell, dynasties flourished and crumbled, empires came and vanished, and still the Sphinx watched. To the ancient Egyptians, it became a symbol of divine kingship, of the sun god Ra, of eternal watchfulness. To us, It may be something more. A sentinel of deep time, its weathered flanks whispering of rains that fell when the Sahara was green. When the world was different, when perhaps another civilization walked the earth. If the Sphinx truly predates dynastic Egypt, then it stands as one of the fingerprints of the gods. As some call them, evidence of a mother culture that thrived. Before the flood, before the catastrophe of 800 years ago. Its builders, whoever they were, left no inscriptions, no names, no records. They left only the lion with a human face, staring endlessly toward the rising sun. As you rest tonight, let that image drift through your mind. A figure carved in silence, gazing across time. A monument not only of stone, but of memory. Perhaps it is trying to tell us something. Perhaps it is saying, we were here long before you thought. We saw the rains, we saw the floods, we saw the end of an age, and we left this sentinel to remind you. The great Sphinx is a riddle, but perhaps that is its purpose. Not to give answers, but to provoke questions. Not to speak, but to make us listen to the stone, to the rain, to the forgotten chapters of our own story. So breathe gently now, and picture the Sphinx in the soft light of dawn. Its massive paws rest upon the desert floor. Its eyes gaze far beyond the horizon. Its body bears the scars of rain from an age before memory. It waits, patient, as it has always waited, a guardian of secrets, a sentinel of forgotten rain. The river of memory now carries us northward to the rolling hills of southern Turkey, where stones rise from the earth like the bones of a forgotten giant. This place is called Göbekli Tepe, the belly hill. For thousands of years it lay buried, hidden beneath soil and time, until farmers, ploughing their fields in the 1990s, struck stone that was not natural rock, but carved pillars. What emerged stunned the world, the oldest known temple complex on earth, built not by farmers, not by kings, but by hunter-gatherers, long before writing, pottery, or the wheel. Close your eyes and picture it. Great T-shaped pillars, some 20 feet tall, weighing as much as 20 tons, arranged in vast stone circles. Each pillar carved with exquisite reliefs, foxes, lions, snakes, vultures, wild boars, abstract symbols whose meanings we can only guess. The artistry is precise, deliberate, sophisticated. This was no casual work of nomads. This was vision. This was knowledge. This was something profound. Carbon dating tells us Göbekli Tepe is at least 11,600 years old, built at the very end of the Younger Dryas, just as the Ice Age was drawing to a close. This means it predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years, the Great Pyramids by 7,000. It was built in a time when humanity was supposed to be primitive, scattered bands of foragers with no permanent settlements. And yet here stands a temple complex of monumental scale aligned to the stars, built with cooperation, planning, and genius. Breathe softly now, and imagine the people who built it. Survivors, perhaps, of the great flood and fire, carrying fragments of memory from a world lost. They gathered on this hill, in the shadow of the catastrophe, and raised pillars to the sky, perhaps as a sanctuary, perhaps as a monument, perhaps as a way to anchor their memory in stone so it would not vanish as their world had. Some scholars believe Göbekli Tepe marks the birth of organized religion, a place where communities came together not to live, but to worship, to feast, to share in rituals. Others suggest it was a center of knowledge, encoding astronomical cycles such as the precession of the equinoxes, or preserving the story of a comet that shattered the Ice Age. The carvings of vultures, scorpions, and abstract symbols have been interpreted by some as a star map, a record of the very impact event that triggered the Younger Dryas flood. Now picture the site as it once was: fires flickering, shadows dancing on carved animals, drums beating, voices chanting. A circle of humanity gathered beneath the stars, remembering what had been lost, hoping to preserve it for the future. This was not merely a temple. It was a time capsule, a message across millennia. We survived. We remember. We leave this here for you to know we existed. And then, mysteriously, the site was deliberately buried. The circles were covered with earth and stone, entombed as if to protect them. For thousands of years, they lay hidden, until only a rounded hill remained, silent above the plains. Why did the builders fear their work would be destroyed? Did they intend it as a message for a distant future, to be uncovered when the world was ready to remember? Or was it part of their ritual, a cycle of building and burial, echoing the cycles of life and death, destruction and rebirth? Let your breathing fall into the rhythm of mystery. Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider what we know of our past. It suggests that advanced social organization, monumental architecture, even astronomy and symbolic art existed millennia earlier than we thought. It whispers that perhaps humanity did not climb slowly, step by step, from primitive ignorance to civilization. Perhaps we rose, we fell, we rose again. Perhaps there was a forgotten chapter before the flood, and Göbekli Tepe is its echo. Consider this: the builders of Göbekli Tepe were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers, yet they quarried, transported, and erected stones of immense weight. They carved them with precision. They aligned them with the heavens. No village of that era shows such sophistication. Where did this knowledge come from? Was it learned slowly or inherited suddenly? A gift or a memory from a lost people? Now imagine standing there at dawn. The air is cool, the stones rise tall around you, their carvings sharp against the sky. Birds circle overhead. The horizon glows with light. In that moment, you feel both awe and connection to the builders, to the survivors, to the memory they carved into stone. It is as if the pillars themselves are speaking, though in a language beyond words. Göbekli Tepe has been called the world's first cathedral, but it may also be the world's first memorial. A shrine not only to gods, but to survival. A stone testament that humanity endured the flood, endured the fire, and carried forward something precious: memory, wisdom, hope. As you rest tonight, let the image of those circles surround you. Pillars rising like guardians, carved animals watching silently, stars wheeling above. Feel the quiet of a place built not for living, but for remembering. A place where the survivors of an agending catastrophe gathered to anchor their story in stone. The Sphinx whispers of reigns from forgotten ages. Göbekli Tepe whispers of survivors who refused to let their knowledge vanish. Together they tell us, there was a world before, and though it was drowned, though it was buried, it has not been entirely lost. The memory is here, in stone, waiting for us to listen. So breathe gently now, and imagine yourself walking through the circles of Göbekli Tepe, your footsteps soft on the ancient earth. Place your hand on the cold stone, feel the carved relief beneath your fingers. You are touching not only rock, but history, the memory of those who came before, who faced the flood and left behind a temple of survival. The river of memory now flows across the world, carrying us from Turkey's sacred hill into mountains, islands, and valleys where stones rise not in circles, but in walls, foundations, and temples so vast they defy imagination. These are the megaliths, colossal blocks of stone, cut and fitted with precision, scattered across the earth like fingerprints of a forgotten hand. Close your eyes and picture them. In the high Andes of Peru lies Sacsayhuaman, a fortress built of stones so massive, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together like pieces of a puzzle. The seams are so tight that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. The walls curve, rise, and fall as if alive, each stone uniquely shaped yet locked into harmony. Who could have carved and placed them in an age when bronze tools were not yet known? Journey further south to Pumapunku near Lake Titicaca. There you will find blocks cut with such machine-like precision that they resemble pieces of a giant stone kit, slots and grooves waiting to be assembled. Some weigh hundreds of tons, yet were quarried miles away. How were they moved? How were they cut? Even today, with modern saws and drills, the perfection is difficult to replicate. Travel east to the Mediterranean, and you come to the island of Malta, where ancient megalithic temples rise, older than the pyramids. Aligned to the solstices, their stones carved into sweeping apses and altars. No inscriptions name their builders. No records explain their purpose. They stand silent, immense, as if awaiting recognition. Farther still, in Lebanon, you will find the foundations of the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek. Beneath Roman ruins lie stones so large, some weighing over 1,000 tons, that they are called the trilith. Giants lying patiently in their sockets. The Romans built atop them, but it is clear the foundation was already ancient when Rome was young. And in Egypt, near Abydos, lies the Assyrian, a subterranean temple, its style starkly different from the ornate hieroglyphic halls of pharaohs. Massive granite blocks, unadorned, fitted with seamless precision, lie deep beneath the sand. It feels older, deeper, as though it belongs not to the dynastic Egyptians, but to another time, another hand. Breathe slowly and let these images gather. Stones scattered across the world, yet all whispering the same enigma. Technology and knowledge beyond their supposed age. Could it be coincidence that dozens of cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, all stumbled upon the same advanced methods of quarrying, transporting, and fitting megaliths? Or is it possible that these are the remnants of a single, older tradition, a global science passed down from a civilization that vanished in the flood? Think of the craftsmanship. No mortar, no inscription, only precision. As if the builders cared not for leaving their names, but for leaving endurance. Their work was their signature. Their message was their silence. Now imagine the floodwaters of 12,800 years ago, surging across continents, swallowing coasts, erasing cities. Survivors fled inland, to mountains, to islands, to safe high ground. Perhaps they brought with them fragments of their knowledge, how to cut stone, how to align with stars, how to raise monuments that would outlast the waters. And perhaps they built again in scattered places, leaving us these megaliths as memorials, as messages, as anchors of continuity. Consider, too, the uncanny similarities. The polygonal masonry of Sacsayhuaman resembles the walls of Greece and Japan. The precision of Pumapunku echoes the cuts of Egypt. The alignments of Malta mirror those at Stonehenge. The sheer size of Baalbek recalls the grandeur of forgotten myths. Different continents, different times, but one architectural language, the language of stone. Now let your breathing deepen. Picture yourself walking among these stones. Place your hand on their cool surface. Feel the grooves, the joints, the immovable weight. Know that someone, thousands of years ago, stood where you stand, placed that stone, looked at the same stars above. The builders are gone, their names lost, but their work remains, enduring through ages, through floods, through time itself. Modern archaeologists often attribute these structures to later cultures, Inca, Romans, Egyptians, and indeed, those cultures built upon them, used them, revered them. But the foundations, the oldest layers, often bear no mark, no inscription, no trace of the supposed builders. They feel different, older, as though they belong to another chapter entirely. This is the riddle of the megaliths. Are they merely the achievements of scattered cultures, each pushing the limits of human ingenuity? Or are they the fingerprints of a forgotten civilization, scattered remnants of a world drowned and erased, but not entirely lost? As you rest tonight, let these questions settle in your mind like stars over a dark plain. Imagine the colossal stones lying silent beneath the moon, their weight anchoring them through centuries, their presence whispering of mysteries yet untold. Imagine the builders, anonymous yet brilliant, laboring with a knowledge we cannot yet comprehend. Imagine the floodwaters rising, swallowing cities, leaving only stones behind, the one thing heavy enough to endure. The megaliths are not only monuments, they are memories. They are the scar of water, written in stone instead of myth. They tell us that there was once a science, a skill, a tradition that spanned the earth. And though its people vanished, their stones remain, waiting for us to listen. So breathe gently now. Let the image of Sacsayhuaman, S-walls, Puma, Punkus, Precision, Malta's temples, Baalbek's trilithon, and the Osirians' hidden chambers drift across your imagination. See them as scattered islands in a sea of time, fragments of a lost map. And know that in their silence, they are still speaking, telling us that we are not the first to build, nor the first to dream, nor perhaps even the first to fall. The river of memory now turns from monuments of stone to records of ink. Across libraries and monasteries, in the dusty corners of archives, lie maps drawn centuries ago, maps that should not exist and yet do. They whisper of coastlines long buried, of knowledge far older than the hands that copied them. They are the ancient maps, traces of a forgotten world. Close your eyes and picture a parchment unfurled upon a wooden table. The ink is faded, the lines precise, the edges frayed with age. One map above all captures the imagination. The Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral. On its surface are coastlines of South America and Africa, drawn with striking accuracy at a time when much of the world had barely been explored by Europeans. But what startles most is what lies at the bottom of the map. The coastline of Antarctica, not as it appears today, shrouded in ice, but as it would look ice-free. Breathe slowly and let that sink in. Antarctica has been buried beneath ice for thousands of years. Modern science has only recently, through seismic surveys, revealed the rock contours beneath. Yet here it was, drawn on a map from the 16th century, as if copied from a source long older than Piri Reis himself. How is this possible? Piri Reis claimed his map was based on earlier sources, charts handed down through generations, copied from even older originals. Could these source maps date back to a civilization before the flood, before the sea swallowed the coastal plains of the Ice Age? If so, the Piri Reis map is not just a curiosity, it is a window into a memory of a world that no longer exists. And the Piri Reis map is not alone. Other ancient maps, like the Orontius Phonaeus map of 1531, also depict Antarctica in surprising detail, with rivers and mountains sketched as though someone had once seen them ice-free. The Zeno map of 1380 shows Greenland not as one frozen mass, but as two islands, something only confirmed by modern satellite imaging. The Bourget map of 1737 describes Antarctica's subglacial topography with uncanny accuracy, centuries before radar revealed it. Now imagine the implications. For someone to map Antarctica without ice, the source would have to predate the last time the continent was free, more than 6,000 years ago, perhaps even 12,000 at the end of the Ice Age. That is the same window as the Younger Dryas catastrophe, the same time as the Great Flood myths, the same era when the Sphinx and Göbekli Tepe may have been born. It is as if all the fragments point to one lost chapter, one vanished age. Picture it now, an ancient maritime people, skilled in navigation, sailing along coastlines that no longer exist. Their ships move across oceans, their astronomers chart the stars, their cartographers sketch coastlines onto parchment, papyrus, or perhaps even stone. They create a world map, not of myth, but of geography. And when their civilization falls, when the flood erases their harbors and the sea swallows their cities, fragments of their maps survive, passed from hand to hand, copied, distorted, reassembled. They resurface centuries later in the hands of Renaissance mapmakers who had no idea of their true antiquity. Now let your breathing deepen and consider the poetry of this. The megaliths are memory carved in stone. The Sphinx is memory carved in bedrock. Göbekli Tepe is memory carved in circles of pillars, and the maps, they are memory carved in ink, each one a fragment of the same lost story, a world older, more connected, more advanced than we remember. Skeptics, of course, argue otherwise. They say the maps are errors, misinterpretations, coincidences, that what looks like Antarctica is merely a distorted South America, that the accuracy is exaggerated, and perhaps they are right. Yet the convergence of so many anomalies, accurate coastlines, price features, knowledge of longitude centuries before its invention, strains coincidence. The maps remain a riddle, one the orthodox timeline cannot easily explain. Now imagine yourself as a sailor of that forgotten age. You set your vessel upon the sea, guided by stars, by sun, by winds. You trace coastlines with careful hand, marking bays, peninsulas, rivers. You do not think you are making history. You are simply recording what you see. And yet, unknowingly, you are leaving behind a clue for the distant future, a trace that will survive when your temples are drowned, when your people are gone, when only myth remembers your name. The maps remind us that knowledge, like water, flows. It does not vanish completely, even when civilizations do. It seeps into the cracks of history, resurfaces in unexpected places, carried forward by those who do not even know its origin. We are inheritors of fragments, piecing them together into a story we are only beginning to remember. As you drift into the stillness of night, imagine these maps laid out before you, the inked coastlines of South America, the strange depiction of Antarctica without ice, the rivers flowing where none should be, the mountains standing where today there is only frozen silence. Picture a hand reaching across time, placing these maps into your care, as if to say, we were here, we knew the world, do not forget us. The ancient maps are not only charts, they are whispers. They are the memory of a world that sailed the oceans before us, a world erased but not entirely lost. Their coastlines are like ghostly fingerprints, reminding us that history is deeper, broader, more mysterious than we ever imagined. So breathe gently now, and let the parchment fold itself away in your mind. Let the maps drift back into the shadows of libraries and monasteries. Know that they are still there, waiting for us to look again, waiting for us to remember. and let the quiet thoughts settle over you, that the world we know is not the whole world, that beneath the waves and behind the myths lies another story waiting to be told. The river of memory has carried us across time, across continents, across stone and story and sea. We have listened to Sumer and Akkad, to Greece and India, to China and the Americas. We have stood before the Sphinx, walked among the circles of Göbekli Tepe, traced the lines of ancient maps, and in every place the same whisper rises. There was a flood, there was fire, there was loss, and yet there was survival. Now, as we reach the final bend of the river, the great question remains: who were the survivors? Who carried the flame of knowledge through the darkness? And why did later generations call them gods? Close your eyes and imagine the aftermath of the Younger Dryas, 12,000 years ago. The skies are clearing, but the land is broken. Glaciers have melted, seas have risen, forests are charred. The mammoths and mastodons are gone. Tribes wander, scattered and afraid. Amid the devastation, a few figures appear, strangers from across the sea, or from the mountains, or from some place untouched. They bring with them seeds, tools, stories, laws. They show people how to plant, how to build, how to count the stars. To the survivors of catastrophe, they seem not human, but divine. Think of the names that echo across the world. Viracocha, the bearded god of the Andes, who came after a flood, taught agriculture, and promised to return. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent of the Aztecs, who also arrived after chaos, bringing law and knowledge. Oannes, the fishman of Mesopotamia, who rose from the sea to teach writing, mathematics, and crafts. Osiris of Egypt, a civilizing god who arrived from across the waters to bring order and agriculture. In every culture, the same figure appears, a bringer of knowledge, a guide, a teacher. Were these gods, or were they survivors? Fragments of a lost civilization, carrying forward the flame of memory into a broken world. Breathe slowly and let the image settle. Survivors of the flood, scattered across the globe, arriving in strange lands. To the traumatized hunter-gatherers they encountered, they would have seemed otherworldly, taller, perhaps paler, their clothing different, their skills incomprehensible. They could predict the stars, move stones, shape fields. To those who knew only survival, this was godlike. And so the memory of teachers became the memory of gods. Consider also the myths of conflict among the gods. In Mesopotamia, Enki defies the council to save humanity, while Enlil wishes for destruction. In Greece, Prometheus defies Zeus to give fire to man. In India, Vishnu preserves life against the cosmic flood. These may not be tales of divine politics at all, but memories of human factions. Some survivors choosing isolation to guard their knowledge in secrecy, others choosing to share, to seed humanity with wisdom. Over time, these choices were mythologized into battles among gods. And what of the flame itself, the knowledge carried forward? Look again at Göbekli Tepe, aligned to the stars. Look at the megaliths, carved with impossible precision. Look at the maps, showing coastlines unseen for millennia. These may be the echoes of that flame, fragments of science, astronomy, engineering, preserved imperfectly but stubbornly, like coals glowing after fire. Now imagine yourself in the place of those who received this gift. You are a child of catastrophe, your world shattered, your people scattered. And into your village walks a stranger who shows you how to make fire, how to plant seed, how to build a stone wall. You would not call him an engineer, an astronomer, a survivor. You would call him a god. And to your children, you would tell his story as myth, so it would not be forgotten. This, perhaps, is why the flood myths are so haunting. They are not only about destruction, they are about continuity. They are about the flame that survived, carried not by chance, but by will. Whether divine or human, whether from this world or another, someone carried knowledge across the flood and placed it gently in the hands of a new humanity. Let your breathing deepen and picture that flame. A single torch in the darkness passed from hand to hand, from age to age. Sometimes it flickered, sometimes it dimmed, sometimes it nearly died, but it never went out completely. It is the flame that burned in Ziusudra's sacrifice, in Noah's altar, in Deucalion's stones, in Manu's ark, in U's canals, in Virakacha's teachings. It is the flame of survival, of memory, of hope, and now it burns in us. We are the descendants of survivors, the heirs of the flame. We build our cities, send our ships across seas, launch our satellites into the sky, and still the flood myths whisper, reminding us of fragility, of cycles, of humility before the forces greater than ourselves. They remind us that what was lost once can be lost again, but they also remind us that knowledge can endure, that humanity can rise after even the greatest fall. So breathe gently now, and let this thought cradle you to rest, that the stories of the flood are not only tales of endings, but of beginnings, that the gods of myth may have been men and women, scarred survivors, carrying memory like fire through the dark, that the flame they carried is still with us, in our words, in our stones, in our maps, in our dreams. The river of memory slows now, its current easing into silence. The flood has receded, the mountains stand tall, the fields are green again, and in the quiet of this moment, as your own breathing becomes the only sound, you can almost hear it, the faint crackle of that ancient flame, carried across ages, still burning, still alive within you.